So I'm Casey Byer, the CEO of the Santa Cruz County Chamber of Commerce, and for many years we have hosted in-person candidate forums at the local and state level. With the election cycle being so short this year, and we're having a March primary instead of a June primary, uh, we have decided to kind of switch it up and only do the city council candidate forum for the March primary. And a special treat is we have some illustrious UCSC interns that work with us this quarter, and this is their program. So I'm going to turn it over to Cameron and Rika, who will lead the forum for us. Take it away, you guys.
Right, thank you. Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm a fourth year UCSC student majoring in politics. And then Rich, I want to introduce yourself really quick as well.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Richa. I'm a second year at UCSC, and I'm a double major in politics and legal studies. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Awesome. So yeah, this forum is really just us asking a few questions to city council candidates that are relevant to the business community and the chamber members at large. Of course, it's being recorded and it'll be posted on the chamber's website as well as like a summary of everything going down. So yeah, this is mainly a forum style of meeting, so it's not really a debate. However, if another member says something that you really want to respond to, feel free to. So yeah, the general style will just be us asking you guys questions. And also for any audience members in here right now, if you have any questions you want to ask the candidates, feel free to put them in the chat. We may ask a few of those if we get any and if we have time. But I think that we can just get straight into introductions as well. Ms. Kalantari Johnson, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm a fellow alum. I moved to my name is Shepard Kalantari Johnson. I am the incumbent and running for District 3, Santa Cruz City Council District 3. So I'm a slug. I moved here in 95 to attend the university and pretty much never left, with a few years in San Francisco. Some things I want to share is that I come from a background of businesses. My dad was a small business owner in Iran, and then when we moved here in 1985, he started anew and started a business with my uncle. My husband owns a small business in town, and I'm in consulting business. But my professional career has been in public health and social services, so I have both lenses and can bring both into the work that I do in the city. This background of mine has impacted my focus over the last 3 years. One of them has been to work closely with our small businesses and with the economic development department. And I'll share more about specific work that I've done. But I hope to continue these efforts over the next term, should I get elected. And I look forward to working with our small business community and our business community in Santa Cruz County.
All right, thank you for that. Moving on, Mr. Tanachi, if you could introduce yourself too.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Thanks for having us today. We're happy to be here. I am also a graduate from the UC system. However, I do not have the joy of being a slug. I'm a gaucho. So Santa Barbara studied ecology and systematics, which is essentially very nerdy biological-based academia. But in the entirety of that process, I worked as a plumber. I was a tile setter. I worked in food service. So I have a pretty broad swath of background. Professionally, after my undergrad, I went on and also in San Francisco. In fact, at the Institute for Health and Healing, Shebra. I don't know if you're familiar with that outfit, but started in the medical services and then branched out, went back into biology, all the while doing side work in construction. So I could go on forever. I'm going to hold it there. But my understanding specific to Chamber of Commerce, same deal. My mom was a school teacher and worked on the side, actually ran a commercial plant rental business for a lot of the businesses in San Jose at the time, her and my grandma. So the nuance of small business, I understand. Large business is something that I'm looking forward to learning more about specific to here in Santa Cruz in terms of who the players are and what their needs are. So thank you for having us here today.
Right, thank you for coming. And last but not least, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Joe Thompson. I'm a third year politics major, but I'll be graduating in June. And for me, it's, I'm running this for Santa Cruz City Council to represent, the working families, students, and seniors in the district. That also includes the business community. The district I'm running to represent has Harvey West Park, which includes the Harvey West area, which has a lot of businesses and small businesses in that area. And for me, it's really important as a union organizer to also recognize that you can't have unions without businesses, and it's a partnership. And for me, it's making sure that we're partnering together and making the best for workers, but also the best for business owners so they can continue to thrive as well. That's what I plan to do in the city council, is balancing that kind of perspective. But for me and my background, I grew up in Lincoln, California. That's where I come from. And, very rural community, but I'm glad to be in Santa Cruz. And, honestly, it's one of the best communities I lived in, except for the storms. The storms have been kind of rough these last couple of winters, but everything else has been great. And I love being in this community. And yeah, super excited to learn more about the chamber, and whether I win or lose, I look forward to, building a relationship and partnership in this community.
All right, thank you so much. So we got introductions out of the way. We're going to jump straight into the questions, and Richa is going to start us off.
Right, so to start us off, we're going to be talking a bit about housing. So, given the pressing issue of affordable housing in Santa Cruz and the fast approaching 2031 deadline for increased housing in California, we'd just like to discuss your guys' perspective on affordable housing. What is your definition of affordable, and what strategies are in place to reduce housing prices and enhance availability for residents of Santa Cruz? Mr. Tanachi, you will get to go first.
Excellent. And I just want to take the moment. I failed to do so earlier, but my name's a little more simple, I promise. It's just Dave Tanasi. Just think beach bum tan ass e Tanasi. It was changed when we came over, and my dad just stuck with it, so we stay there. But what does affordable mean to me? I would say that given the rapid increase in our local median income, inclusionary rents and for sale unit prices are outpacing the median wages for local service and public sector workers, who are often the most housing insecure, speaking kind of what Joe just brought up in their intro. So I believe we need to focus intensively on policies that lead to the production and preservation of low-income units that will require cross-agency collaboration like we're doing here today, effective planning, and resources. And I feel that to address the affordable housing in Santa Cruz, I'll build upon the city's successful past efforts and pursue new and innovative strategies to leverage the resources needed to make those affordable units available. So we'll prioritize the use of city property, pursue surplus state lands exclusively for 100% affordable housing projects, ensuring that these developments are accessible to all of our residents. And additionally, I'll aggressively pursue seeking state and federal grant opportunities, coupled with identifying a stable local funding stream to facilitate both the production and preservation of affordable housing while implementing the local policies to maximize inclusionary units within high-density projects. This will foster a more sustainable, equitable, diverse landscape for our community.
Thank you so much. And now moving on to Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so this is a really big issue. Housing is the number one issue in our entire community, as we know. And I think it kind of has to come from a multi-pronged approach. We need to be addressing homelessness, getting people into safe housing, and really start to tackle these major problems. But when it comes to actually like how do we define affordable housing, look at the Santa Cruz City Council right now. I think they're actually doing a really great job on housing. That's why we got designated a pro-housing city, and that's thanks to the work that Shepherd Kalantari Johnson has done, Sonia Bruner, Mayor Keeley, like all these council members are doing amazing work. I think we need to continue that work, because when we got designated as a pro-housing city, that allows us to get more access to resources and really opens up the floodgates to building more housing, which is I think what we need in this community. And for me, it's like, to me, we need to have more housing built all over the city of Santa Cruz, whether it's in my district, the 5th district, on campus, downtown, on the west side, everywhere needs housing. And I think that there's a lot of NIMBYism in the city of Santa Cruz. That's just a common thing that we see throughout the city. But I'm honored to be endorsed by YIMBY because I'm pro housing. And when I say that, that means we need actually people who are going to stand up and fight for housing. And I think there's 2 housing projects in my district. One of the United Peace Church, that's a really controversial project. But I'm supporting that project, and we'll be going to city council to support that project because I think it's needed in our community. And it's one of those things where we have such a big need of affordable housing and the lack of it that we need council members who are willing to stand up and say, hey, here's what we need in our community. Here's how I'm going to get affordable housing. And we can't have council members that are going to give in to NIMBYism or people who are going to come after them for supporting, taller buildings. I just think that's a kind of a ridiculous kind of thing that people get attacked on. But it's a bigger issue, and I happy to answer any follow-up questions on like specific housing policies.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson. And now, last but not least, Ms. Kalantari Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Thompson and I are quite aligned on the issue of housing. I'm also endorsed by Santa Cruz YIMBY. One of the reasons why we are in this housing crisis is because we have denied development for so long, not just in the city of Santa Cruz, but countywide. And that's now starting to show. Now we've shifted gears. In the last, I'd say 5 to 8 years, we've shifted gears. And because of that, as Mr. Thompson mentioned, we have been given the designation of pro-housing, and we were one of 6% of the state that met our regional housing allocation goals. So that's a pretty big deal. And with that comes more resources. So as a pro-housing designated community, we will be eligible for a number of grants and will be competitive for those grants. So we have about, I believe, 2,000 or so units that are due to come to the downtown area. The downtown area is where it makes the most sense for us to have high density housing. I also agree that we need all sorts of housing throughout our community, but we have an opportunity here to really create a new neighborhood and to really think about and design what that will look like. Now, there was a question about affordable housing, and as I mentioned, our RHNA goals, we met our very low income and low income and all the different levels of housing. But what we're finding is that we have this missing middle, right? So folks in our community who are not eligible for very low income or low income, and they aren't able to find housing. So these are our teachers, our social workers, our police officers. So that is a huge area that we need to solve for. And I'll wrap up with that. I have 100% positive rate in voting for housing as my 3 years on the city council. And yeah, I'll just end it there.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Cameron for our next question.
All right, thanks, Richa. So yeah, this question is about small businesses. So the Santa Cruz and the chamber community at large is pretty proud to maintain a small business dominated Santa Cruz and downtown. However, I think as we all know, I mentioned housing, property prices, and housing prices have been increasing in recent years. So how do you as a city council, or how would you as a city council member maintain the status quo of a small business dominated downtown in the face of rising labor costs? Let's start off with Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so this is one of the ideas that I had, and this is kind of going back to housing, is that when we're building high density housing downtown, it encourages people to shop small businesses downtown locally. So that's one of the things where I think if we continue to support our downtown businesses by building higher density housing in the downtown area. One of the ideas that I want to talk to small businesses about and see if they'd be open to it is potentially a rent control ordinance for the small businesses downtown. So this would be something where the city council could put forward an ordinance saying if you're a small business and you qualify for whatever, we'll have to work out the numbers, but we could have rent control for these small businesses so they aren't, spending a lot of money going to their on their rent for their properties as well. So that's one of the things that I want to explore that with some of the small businesses down there. I also think that for me, I'm not from the business community. I don't know what the needs are of our downtown small businesses. So it's one, if elected to the city council, my goal is to work with them on what their needs are and really kind of come at a perspective of this is something that I lack. I don't want to claim to know everything about the business community because reality is I don't. And I want to get to know the business community more, but by allowing council members to be able to work directly with our business community partners and really show that this is something where I want to engage on and work with our small businesses, because I know that some of them are really struggling. I always joke that I, by myself, support Santa Cruz Coffee Roasters by how much I go there every single day. But it's just one of those things too, where we need those small businesses because we need to support the workers, and labor costs are rising, but it can't just be all on the businesses themselves to support it. They have to have help from the government, help from the city council to make sure we keep our community local, and we're not shopping and selling out to the national Starbuckses, for example. But it really has to be community focused. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And same question to Ms. Kalantari Johnson, please.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for that question. So I'll talk a little bit about how I have been working with our small business community and my hopes should I be reelected. So I serve on the Downtown Management Corporation, which works with the businesses in our downtown area. And I've also attended a number of the Midtown East Side Business Association meeting over the last 3 years that I've been on council. And what truly makes our community unique, I was just having this conversation, is that we thrive on these small businesses. I mean, retail is a dying breed since even before the pandemic, but certainly after the pandemic. But we have something to treasure here, and that's our small business community. So some of the work I've done, I mean, some of it, frankly, one of the biggest things that we hear from our downtown businesses and our SoCal corridor, Midtown East Side, is that we want the space to be safe and clean and welcoming and accessible. So it can be as simple as getting trash cans put in by the Metro bus stations, bus stops on SoCal Avenue, which I helped facilitate, to increasing our investment in our downtown ambassador program, our mental health liaisons, and police presence downtown. So those are the things that I've worked on, that I've contributed to enhancing, and we've seen a difference. We're hearing from our small businesses that it's impacting how customers feel, how their own workers feel. There was a lack of sense of safety for some of the employees in some of these business areas. So we've seen a shift, and we have more work to do. I just brought forward an agenda item last week. Was last week the council meeting? The last council meeting, I brought forward an agenda item with some of my council colleagues and the Economic Development Department, really explicitly naming activation of alleyways and placemaking, addressing neglected and empty storefronts that cause harm to surrounding businesses, deciding on a temporary and permanent home for our downtown farmers market, really planning and visioning, like I mentioned in my last response, around the housing that's going to go down there and how we design for a full, robust downtown. So those are the pieces that we put forward. It was unanimously approved by council. So I'll be working on these certainly over the next year and beyond, should I get reelected. And the other thing I'll say is that there are organizations such as the Small Business Development Community, nationwide organizations that we as a city have and can continue to tap into to see what resources exist for small businesses.
All right, thank you. And finally, Mr. Tanasi, if you could finish us out.
Yeah, certainly. I think for those of us that grew up in this area, we know that our small businesses, which essentially are the cornerstone of what make us unique, independent, and exciting, something different than everything else that we see in and around the area. So they are vital to our identity as a community, and they are important that they also are thriving, not only for the opportunity to provide employment, say, to soon-to-be UCSC graduates or while they're going to school, but also the idea that we can utilize our small businesses as a pinpoint for identity and cultural vitality. So when we're talking about downtown and small businesses, I'd say the first and foremost thing in my experience of running a small general construction company here in Santa Cruz is that the cost is simply atrocious. So the difference between looking to rent, say, a storage space or a shop space, I'm speaking specifically to Hilltop Homes here. So my last job before coming over to the city was redoing all of the exterior doors of Hilltop. So it's 188 doors. Our ability to find space for storage of materials and general shop space in and around that area was completely null and void. We ended up way out on Research Park, so pretty much closer to 41st. The reason there is the cost. So back to what Joe was echoing, I think it's absolutely important that we have protection specifically for small businesses in the downtown corridor. And what we're talking about is, as long as the landlords have an unfettered ability to increase the commercial rents and treat their tenants poorly, they will not have the stability that we as a community need from our businesses in order for us to acquire products, to enjoy the space that's produced in the shopping experience downtown along Pacific Mall, and for those businesses to thrive, hire employees, and offer great wages. And so there really is a balance there that needs to be struck, and an understanding between the workers, the businesses, and the community at large. So on that note, two-pronged here. One, making Pacific so that it is accessible. So we're talking about things that Shebra brought up there, but we're also talking about improving multimodal access. We want Pacific to be a space that people casually want to be as a public space, and that empowers their ability then to be down there and then seek out the businesses themselves and furnish them as well. So that's one part of it. So we're looking at accessibility, whether that's car, transit, bike, pedestrian, what we now consider multimodal, anything but cars. And so we need to improve and support the access there. And then also the, as I'm working downtown, as I'm looking at 100 Laurel, 418 Front, 530 Front, soon to be starting in construction. Oh, time. I'll stop there.
If you have like one final thought, you can finish it, but
it's okay. It's okay. But I think the three of us are standing in similarity here, that what we're looking for is the businesses to thrive, and in order to do so, the communities themselves, so our workers, our families, our teachers, our city workers, need to have wages that reflect the ability to relax and have stability at home, and then engage the business community.
all right, thank you for that. And that leads actually into my next question about families and stability at home. So according to a real cost measure of Santa Cruz County that is taking into account food, healthcare, childcare, transportation, as much as 33% of families in Santa Cruz County do not meet that standard. So what do you think are the leading causes of this, and what do you think are the best ways to mitigate them? And let's start with Ms. Kalantari Johnson, please.
Housing is, I think, one of the #1 leading contributing factors to this. And we've already spoken about it, but we have not been building housing. We have not been building housing of all levels. So we're working on it. We've made a huge shift, and I feel really confident that we're turning the curve, and that we will see these statistics and numbers not looking the same. So housing, the other is access to childcare. We do a poor job throughout the state, but really also in Santa Cruz County and in the city of Santa Cruz, to provide affordable childcare. I mean, as a working mom, I was faced with that challenge when my kids were younger. One of the things we're doing in the city, and that we've done for a number of years now, is we have a children's fund. And just 2 years ago, I believe it was 2 years ago, we put this children's fund before the voters and asked them to approve that 20% of cannabis tax revenue go towards children's fund. And what that does is it provides for things like childcare, things like after-school programming. And to date, we've had about $300,000 a year that goes into that fund. The other, I would say, is public transportation is something that we can help our workers with. So I sit on the Metro board currently. I've served as the Metro board chair for the last year. And because of some of our work, my work with youth and COPA youth and their advocacy, we've piloted a youth cruise free program. That's now been in effect for almost a year. So young people under the age of 24 can ride the bus system for free. We are now going to pilot a fare-free program for all starting this fall. So it's programs like that. It's opportunities like that. We have to think holistically. What are the needs of a worker? What are the needs of a family? And how can we as a city and as a county contribute to that and help folks while we address the housing crisis?
All right, thank you. And back to Mr. Tanasi.
Yeah, you got it. No worries. You're doing great. Thank you, Cameron. It's a difficult name, I know. And so I'm going to echo a couple things here, and I'm sure Joe will chime in as well, but pretty much housing, affordability, childcare. What we're talking about is bread and butter table issues in the home space for families. And so as we move forward thinking, what is it that we're going to do to account for this? We need to increase affordability and support any and all elements of that. So that's not just housing, it's also wages. And so I'm hearing a lot of the things, and as a city worker, I'm literally internalizing the statements about how do paying wages address these questions. So I'm just going to leave that there. But the idea that our cost of living is such a high burden on our community that it reduces the health and vitality of our business community. Folks do not have the time, space, or energy to engage in the process. And so something that's relevant to here is that I just want to touch back. I am not necessarily endorsed by YIMBY, but that does not mean that I am anti-housing. I want to be very specific here. What I am is supportive of our community and our community's desire for housing. So I'll leave that one there and give Joe some time.
Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we covered it. I think the top three issues are, housing, public transportation, and wages. And for me, it's something where it really does come down to the wage you're getting, because that determines what housing you can get, what food and gas you can get, what public transportation mode you have to use. If you're being paid minimum wage, that means that you can barely afford housing. That means that you're, either if you have a car, you can barely afford gas for your car, and then getting groceries, like it all just adds up. So I think the best way to combat it is to kind of by having a good public transportation system, which I'm glad Trevor brought up the Metro Board. That's one of the organizations, if I do get elected, I want to serve on, that, or the RTC. But we have the rail trail that's coming to Santa Cruz. That's going to be huge for our community, making sure people can get from Watsonville to Santa Cruz for relatively cheaply. And when it comes to wages, I think that if you look at other cities like Sunnyvale or San Jose, they have their own city minimum wage ordinances. To me, if elected, that's one of the things I want to work on, is raising the minimum wage in Santa Cruz to be sort of more closer to a living wage. Of course, that would be done in concert with our small businesses, making sure they are not the ones facing the brunt of this. And ideally, it'd be targeted towards larger corporations like Starbucks or Safeway or whatever it is. Make sure they have living wages for their workers, because they're needed in our community, and those are our service workers. And lastly, for housing, we need to be building all types of housing, affordable, market rate, and we need to be developing it all over the city, because there's people who are Section 8 and they have a housing voucher and they can't find housing for market rate. That's a problem. And I know that's why a lot of people in Santa Cruz YIMBY are working on this housing solution, these housing crises, because they want to see that problem alleviated. So I think those are the three biggest issues to making sure we really combat the cost of living problems that we see in Santa Cruz. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. And I'm going to move on to Richa for this next question.
Yeah, and before we get to the next question, just to remind people who are watching, feel free to put questions in the chat, and then we might be able to have time to answer them. So please, if you have any, feel free to put them in the chat. All right. Now, in the light of the recent increase in the California minimum wage to $16 per hour in 2024, impacting all employers, again, we want to just dive into your guys' perspective. Who do you think the potential winners and losers resulting from this change? And do you believe in advocating for minimum wage increases, or do you have reservations about potential impacts on businesses and the economy, or anything else? We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Thompson.
Can you repeat that question? I was having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to be talking about minimum wage. In the recent increase of it going to $16 per hour in 2024, we want to talk about, who do you think the potential winners and losers are resulting from this change? Do you believe in advocating for minimum wage increases, or do you have reservations about the potential impacts on it? And what are those potential impacts?
Yeah, so I, as a union organizer, I'm definitely for minimum wage increases. My union, I work for SEIU Local 1021. We actually won the first ever fast food worker increased wages that were kind of negotiated between the unions and the Chamber of Commerce for the United States. But we were able to get $20 an hour minimum wages for fast food workers, and that's starting, I believe, in April of this year. And then it's also something where, for me, I recognize that especially when minimum wage increases happens, it's usually because the bigger corporations are paying minimum wage, but the smaller businesses are trying to pay their workers a living wage. So to me, it's kind of finding that balance and wanting to recognize that it shouldn't be a one size fits all solution, but there has to be somewhere we can find a middle ground and say, okay, now it's at $16 an hour. When does the next minimum wage increase happen, and where should we meet in the middle? That's how I kind of see the problem, because I know that especially in a small town like Santa Cruz, these small businesses are having a hard time affording their labor costs, but the corporations like Starbucks and Pete's and all these other corporations, they're able to afford paying their workers higher wages. They just choose not to. And that's the problem that I think we need to address, is really holding the corporations accountable while allowing small businesses to thrive. And I think that's the kind of where I would want to get more insight from your organization on what does make the most sense and what is realistic and what would be helpful for the small businesses and for our community at large. That's something where I'm, look forward to doing that if elected.
Thank you so much. And now moving on to Mr. Tanasi.
Yeah, thank you. And so if we step back and kind of take a larger image here, what is it we're trying to address in a minimum wage? We're trying to address cost of living issues for the people at the bottom of the earnings bracket, right? When we say a minimum wage, we're saying you cannot be paid less than this. Now, $16 an hour statewide does not address what we in the city have decided in our negotiations between SEIU as a labor group and City Council in 2022. We know that we eliminated the bottom two steps from our 10-step pay scale because they failed to meet what we considered a living wage at the time, which was $17.84 an hour. So I just want to throw that out there. And then backing up, I do support increasing the minimum wage. It has not kept pace with the rapid increase, like we've been talking here, of the cost of living, even with the recent increases, like what you just asked in the question. So paying workers sufficiently so that they can live in the community where they work supports the community stability, reduces workforce turnover, and that frankly benefits business. So we don't want the burden of these costs to be leveraged against the workers or small businesses who keep money within our community and help us grow and thrive as a community. We do see there's elements and outside players and larger businesses, as Joe mentioned, that are able to absorb some of this burden. And frankly, that's the direction that we're trying to move with the wage increases, trying to say we need y'all to right size some of your business model to address the cost of living specifically in our idyllic, beautiful community. Thank you.
Thank you. And now finally, Ms. Kalantari Johnson.
Great. Yeah, and this is such a complex issue that I've grown up with. As I mentioned, I come from a family of small business owners. We certainly need wages that allow for us to have a workforce, which we're seeing declining. But we also need it to be fair for everyone. We need it to be fair for our small businesses. There's only so much that businesses can increase their prices before folks stop buying their products. So, what I do know from working with some of the small businesses in our community is that we do, in general, pay a lot more than the California minimum wage requirement of $16. Many of the small businesses in our community do, and folks have to get creative, right? What are other ways that businesses can cut costs so that they can pay their workforce at a fair level, so that their workforce can sustain and be able to live here? I think the city can play a real role. We've done some of this. We did some of this during the pandemic, but streamlining of permitting processes, providing incentives. For example, I spoke about the empty storefronts. So providing incentives to really do everything we can to make our business areas, whether it's downtown or the midtown area, vibrant, so that we get more foot traffic and we get more folks to these businesses. So that's some of the things, those are some of the things that the city can do. And I brought up the Small Business Development Center. One of the small businesses that I work with, they said that they offer resources such as having consultants come out and work with small businesses to help them with inventory and sales, so that they can, again, get creative about how to cut corners so that they can maintain a robust wage for their workforce. So we got to get creative.
Thank you so much. And I see Mr. Tanasi.
Oh yeah, can I bridge real quick, actually, and Shebra and I haven't had the opportunity to talk about this yet, but something I wanted to note is that internally in the water department, we've been pushing very aggressively for the adoption of what is known as Appendix M in the California Plumbing Code. Appendix M allows for sizing of water infrastructure for our new commercial and mixed-use buildings, as well as 100% affordable products, that would allow for smaller water infrastructure because our modeling of the hydraulics is very different. And so my question that I put forward in this conversation is recognizing that we as a city are working very diligently to try to reduce those costs. And my question is will we see that cost reduction and those savings be passed on to the businesses, the tenants that will be renting these new commercial spaces, as well as the residents for the mixed use project? So I want to thank Shebra for pushing M through, and we're working really diligently over here. That took 2 years internally as a laborer to get it to Rosemary's table, the director of the water department, and it has moved up the chain, and I'm excited to see the benefit.
Well, if I may just respond really quickly. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And thank you for your advocacy for it. I was happy to bring that forward. I actually worked with some housing advocates as well. And as part of that process is to do an equity assessment, to do exactly what you're bringing up, Mr. Tanasi, is how do we ensure that those dollars do go back to not only the new developments, but folks who are paying the cost in existing housing as well. So next time, let's connect directly.
Thank you both so much. And now, since we don't seem to have any questions in the chat, we're just going to go ahead and move on to our final question for today. And we just want to give you all the opportunity to talk about something you're passionate about. So if you could wave a magic wand and make just one change to the city of Santa Cruz to make it better, what would that look like? And then we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Tanasi.
Oh my goodness. It's a super fanciful question and I enjoy it because it's a thought exercise. Essentially, what is it that we really are looking for? And I say we could chalk it up to these really important issues that we feel. But if we get to the base of it, really, it's community engagement. At the end of the day, our role in council is to bring forward the issues, concerns, constraints, fears, joys of the population. For me, that's District 1. And so the goal is to have community engagement on a level where our population sees what's happening at council, understands the world as they see it, and is bringing forward provocative or maybe new solutions, ideas, essentially bringing everyone's voice to the table. But more than that is having them have a stake in the matter. If what we're talking to y'all about is business, how does our community, who wants our businesses to be unique, thriving, and offering good job opportunities, how can they have a stake in that matter? How can they come forward and feel their voices are heard and they see it transmuted into action? So I'll say if I could wave a magic wand, we would have 100% engagement from the public. And I mean that with a big smile and a big heart, because we know at times it's difficult. Engaging the public is going to bring forward things that might be tough to manage, but I don't want to back away from those conversations. I want to lean into them. I want to ask our community to get involved. I want to provide a path to success for them to be involved and engaged and see what kind of beautiful things we can create together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now moving on to Ms. Kalantari Johnson.
Super tough question. What drives me in my everyday is working towards community well-being. I know that that's a big statement, and there's a lot of entry points and a lot of pathways to get there. I named some of them today. I'll just focus in on one that is a huge issue in our community, and that's homelessness. I've worked on homelessness in the Tenderloin. I've written grants here in our community. I've worked with transition age youth. And when our most vulnerable aren't able to reach well-being, the rest of our community isn't either. So if I were to wave a magic wand, we would address the unaddressed mental health needs, we would address the substance abuse needs, we would address the housing needs, we would address the wage gap needs, and that would help our unhoused population, which would help our housed population. So that was a long answer, but community well-being.
Thank you so much. And now finally, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, this is a big question, and I know we all have issues we want to solve. And for me, it's like Gail Pellerin would be so proud. I'm gonna say I want 100% voter turnout in every city election, and for me, it's just because it's important, and trying to get registered voters to come out and vote in these like local elections, even with Joe Biden being at the top of the ballot, it's going to be a hard challenge. So as long as we keep striving to get as high as turnout as we can, I think that's a goal, and that will help solve all these problems of homelessness, wage gaps, and housing. But thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'm gonna pass it back to Cameron. I think we have a question in the chat and then closing statements.
Would you like me to address that directly, Cameron, or I was typing in the chat, either way?
Oh yeah. If you had just a quick answer to that question.
Sure. And I addressed some of this earlier. I serve on the Downtown Management Corporation and have worked with the Midtown East Side Business Association. So through those two bodies, I've done things such as increased safety and cleanliness in the business corridors. I've worked on the outdoor dining program, which we've done for the for the public program, and now we're working on the private outdoor dining program. What else? I've listed it before, and now I'm blanking. I brought forward an agenda item that has us looking at activation of alleyways and placemaking, looking at assessing our empty storefront and addressing that with potential ordinances, and looking at a permanent space for our farmers market and a sort of a civic town center. Those are just some of the pieces, and I'm happy to follow up directly with you, Mr. Baker. I don't know if it's Mr. or Ms. Baker, and provide more information.
Just to add a little context, this is actually Channing, who is also an intern with the chamber.
Oh.
He's not feeling the greatest, but wanted to still be able to.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Channing. Happy to connect directly if you'd like more.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. So I think, well, thank you all for coming, and I think we're just going to move on to kind of closing statements. So if you have any, oh, sorry, one moment. Yeah, so we actually have a question from Casey really quick. So yeah, we talked a lot about how, this is a good closing question. We talked a lot about how, an individual should be getting an increased minimum wage. And so what about the supervisor of that individual worker? Do you think that these increases in minimum wage, these increases in the lower level of earning should be stacked upwards, I suppose? So yeah, I guess we can start with Mr. Thompson for this question.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this. And this is something where I used to be a barista at Starbucks, and I was actually promoted when I was 18 years old to be a shift supervisor. And for me, I think this is a very important question because with the new fast food workers wage law going into effect this year, we are going to see the wages of the baristas going up to $20 an hour. But that means the shift supervisors are also going to have some sort of wage increase as well. And I don't think they have been announced yet. But what we're seeing at Starbucks is that this does lead to kind of a trickle-up effect where the minimum wage gets increased and then the supervisor wage get increased as well. And then even like our top managers get wage increases as well. So it kind of leads to everyone getting a wage increase. But I think there is a point where, you can't, to me, I would have loved to have it more staggered because going from, people making $15 an hour to $20 an hour is a great wage increase. But it also causes this kind of burden on the businesses where now the next fiscal year they go into, they have this new labor account that they have to take into account for that was just completely different than last year's labor. So it's just, I wish it was more staggered, but I think that there are ways to continually have wage increases that do support small businesses and still hold like corporations accountable for paying their workers a living wage.
All right, thank you for that. And then, Mr. Tanasi, what's your response to the trickle-up effect of minimum wage increases?
With respect to trickle-up effect, I think it's a great question. There's elements here that I can glean on from my own running of a small construction outfit. And I think the question really is of operational need for each individual business. And so we're talking about here is the difference between equity and equality, right? So just because we raise one, does that mean we raise them all? And so I can say within the city structure, what we see is that as laborers, we know where we're at. Our mid-management and supervisors, we see where they're at, and our executives at the top, we see where they're at. So a lot of times the argument as an operational outfit is that to raise one means we raise them all across the board. And we sit here as working families and we say, is that right? Do we need to? Does that actually make sense across the board? Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't get any increases. Again, it's based on each individual outfit, each unit, each business, each organization, however they see fit. But it's going to take a really hardcore internal assessment as to what is really needed for the health of the business and the community at large. So I can speak right here. I'm going to say laborers and supervisors probably both need a pretty stable and steady increase in order to meet the cost of living needs. Doesn't matter what business. I don't know many who are just flourishing right now at current wages relative to housing and cost of living. So I'll say that there. And I think a good example on a leaving note is I want to look forward to the wharf. I think the wharf is a really good opportunity and example in a microcosmic setting to look at the partnerships that can be built between the city and business. And the other one is obviously the Warriors. And we're seeing the increase down there and how that conversation is going to unfold for the benefit and vitality of the community and the city at large. So.
All right, thank you. And then finally, Ms. Kalantari-Johnson, your response to this.
Sure. I mean, look, if we don't have an employer, we won't have an employee, or if we don't have employers, we won't have employees. So we need to be really careful. We need to consider what's gonna break our small business community, and not just break. We don't want our small business community to be surviving. We really want them to be thriving. I said earlier on, this is what makes us really unique. What's different from other communities that see retail go out the door. So fair wages, absolutely. How do we do it in a tiered fashion, in a way that makes sense, that will work for that small business or small businesses? And I don't have an exact answer. That's a hard question that you asked, Casey, but what I am clear about is that I wouldn't want to take any action that would jeopardize our small businesses.
Got it. Thank you. I guess it's like a really quick follow-up on that. Just so is it that it's largely the internal decision of the business with kind of the assistance of the city council? This isn't so much because with the minimum wage increase, obviously it's the government saying everyone has to be paid this much and no less. But in terms of the trickle-up effect, it's much more of an internal decision of the company.
Is that a question for me, Cameron?
Yeah, for you. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, certainly at the city council plays a role with city employees, but with private businesses, yes, it would be an internal process.
Okay. So yeah, I think I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. So just moving on finally to just really quick wrap up closing statements. So yeah, if you just have any final comments for today, let's start with Mr. Tanasi.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to put a question in the verbal chat here right now, which is something that we think about as workers downtown, especially with the increase in development that we're seeing. So currently, when I'm reviewing the mixed use plans for the hydraulic model for water, a thought that's come up both for workers, for general passerbys, et cetera, is how would y'all feel as the businesses if we mandated 2 bathrooms, public access, we the city will clean them, but just increasing access to bathrooms downtown so the burden isn't on the private business, maybe has a little tiny closet in the back with a toilet and a single sink, and all of a sudden it creates a lot of friction, as we know, between people trying to seek services to use the restroom and what happens when they don't find the services to use the restroom. So sounds really simple. It's really granular. It's very nuts and bolts. It's something to think about. And I would love if y'all came forward in the council process and said, hey, this is something we would really love to see. So these are thoughts and discussions that we have while digging in a trench on Pacific. So I think that's my final comments is a question and saying thank you for having us. Can't wait to hear more. I think we learn a lot from each other, and we're really all focused, especially on the unique identity that small business brings to our community of Santa Cruz.
Got it. And then moving on to Ms. Kalantari Johnson, if you have any final words.
Great. Thank you for hosting the forum and thank you guys for your flexibility. I know a lot of work went into this, so I want to specifically thank the interns, Cameron, Richa?
It's Richa.
Cameron, Richa, and Channing for organizing, and for those of you who took time of your day to be here, so thank you guys. You know, my votes and my actions on the city council over the last 3 years should show and be an indication that I am very much in support of our business community and our local business community here in Santa Cruz. I bring that unique lens of both understanding small business and having a public health professional and academic background. And the two really do marry well when we're talking about our local city. I know the Chambers doesn't endorse, but I hope that each of you here or those of you who listen to the recording will support me in serving another term so I can continue the work with all of you and continue the work with our business community. Thank you again.
Thank you for coming. And finally, Mr. Thompson, if you have any closing remarks.
And I'm just going to put my contact info in the chat for everyone. But thank you so much for having me, and thank you for putting this on. You know, I've been honored to be endorsed by the California Democratic Party, Planned Parenthood Advocates Marmonte, Santa Cruz EMB, the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council, along with 50 other former mayors and state, federal elected officials. For me, my goal in the city council is to advocate again for the students, seniors, and working families in the district, but it also includes the businesses in our community that I want to support. So I'm happy to have any further conversations about this. Want to make sure that my platform is representative of the small businesses in my district and throughout our community that are struggling right now, and happy to collaborate on any issues with you guys moving forward. And yeah, Shebra said that your organization doesn't endorse, but happy to be open to chat anytime. Just feel free to reach out. And please, you know, if there's anything in my platform that you think doesn't align with the business community, please let me know. And I'm happy to have a conversation about that and wanting to make sure that that our values are aligned on the issues that we can work on. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Casey, you have any closing remarks as well?
Well, first of all, a big round of applause for our interns that are taking on a yeoman's credit for doing this work. Thank you. They're doing wonderful work for not only the chamber, but for the community at large. So thank you. And I want to thank the candidates for taking time out of their busy schedule to break away and join this Zoom call. We will be recording this call